Hello and welcome to the Every Other Saturday podcast, a brand new episode this week where we're joined by Adam. Adam is a German football writer and journalist, so happy to have him on. If you want to just start off with yourself, mate, what do you do? Where can people find your content?
Yeah, it's a real pleasure to be on. A lot of love from the Rangers community ahead of this big Thursday night tie. So good to be on this podcast as well. And yeah, you can find my work predominantly at the German Football Newsletter. It's a Substack that I've created this year, which details a lot of the action just around the Bundesliga, Bundesliga 2, even a little bit in the third tier as well. So everything about German football you can find there, or you can just follow me right away on Twitter at @sets, Adam Kahn @sets. And yeah, it's exciting to be here.
Yeah, nice one. As always, I'll put your stuff in the description if you want to check that out. If you want to get a further sort of information on German football, this is your man for it. And as always, if you'd like, subscribe, share about for us, very much appreciated. As always, starting off, then we'll go into basically how is the German sort of, how are they feeling, Red Bull Leipzig, about playing Rangers? Obviously, Rangers have, in our opinion, overachieved in Europe this year. We didn't expect to get this far. The performances we've put on have been unbelievable. But how are Red Bull Leipzig feeling about this?
Yeah, I think that Leipzig, of course, in European competition is such a young club. They were just founded in 2009. So to be in the favorite role still feels a little bit uncomfortable, but it's hard not to look at this RB Leipzig squad, the players that they have at hand. We'll obviously get into it later on the show and say, not just in this Rangers fixture, but potentially of all the four sides remaining in the competition, Leipzig is truly the favorites to go on and win. And I think that's something that they'll need to take into they'll need to have them in the back of their head, right? Because Leipzig historically in European competition, they've always looked better when they're a little bit in the outsider role. And coming in as a favorite isn't something they're necessarily accustomed to. And it's something that they'll have to deal with against a Rangers side. And a Rangers side that's obviously knows how to kick out big sides. We saw it earlier in the run with against Borussia Dortmund, something that no German fan had on the horizon, not even myself, of course, who obviously good Rangers are in the domestic competition and some of the talent that they have on the roster. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting one for RB Leipzig, so close to not just the Europa League, but also the DFB Pokal. We're obviously recording this on Wednesday, just hours before that fixture. So fingers crossed they made it to the final and they don't make us look stupid now talking about Leipzig potentially making the double.
Yeah, of course. Obviously, it's going to be a big one for Leipzig as well with the cup, much like Rangers as well. We are sort of out the league chase at the moment. We just reached the cup final as well on Sunday, so we're fighting on two fronts. Leipzig seem to be fighting on two fronts, but also seem to be at nip and tuck with Freiburg and Bayer Leverkusen and retaining that fourth position and third position for Champions League football next year. So Red Bull Leipzig, as you say, like, a very young team, not really been on the scene for a long time, but they've built up a really, really good sort of dominance in German football and European football. Sorry, obviously the start of this year, Champions League, the group of death, you could say it was very hard for them to get out of that group. But putting on good performances against Manchester City, in Nkunku with a hat trick, and then obviously beating Man City, drawn with PSG, some good performances in there. Will that give obviously Leipzig confidence going into the latter ties in Europe? That experience against bigger sides.
Yeah, I think in general the experience, not just this season, but also the previous few seasons. Remember in the Corona bubble, how they made it all the way to the semifinals in the Champions League last year as well, coming through a group with PSG and Manchester United. So also no easy run of it. So this is a side that, despite their tender age, with the likes of Christopher Nkunku, Danny Olmo, Josko Gvardiol, and countless others, they're a side that does actually have quite a bit of experience in key European matches, and it's something that they'll definitely have ahead of Rangers, because Rangers, of course, haven't made it to the Champions League for quite some time, and they don't necessarily know how to go into a match against a side like Manchester United, a side like PSG, and come out victorious. And that's something that Leipzig and all these individual talents have on their CV.
Mm-hmm. No, of course. Lewis, obviously you had a question to ask about Rangers, so on you go.
No, it's just very interesting hearing you talk about obviously Leipzig and beating all these big teams and all that. But Dortmund thought the same as well when they came to Ibrox, and obviously when we went out to Germany and they got a wee shocker there. So I'm just wondering, what is the people in Germany's thoughts on Rangers and the Europa League so far?
Yeah, I think that Borussia Dortmund match definitely was a bit of a shock to the German public, but it's also something that has definitely changed perceptions, because despite the fact that away goals have been ruled out, I mean, European competition in itself is so unpredictable and anything can happen. So when you're at a semifinal and your opponent is also, of course, made to the semifinal, it's not exactly the time to be undermining their performances and thinking you have an easy run of it. We saw with Bayern, of course, in the Champions League against Villarreal, Dortmund, as you mentioned, in the Europa League. So these are big sides that are dropping out to, on paper, inferior opponents. But I mean, end of the day, what happens in the 180 minutes on the pitch is what matters. And that's something that I think Germany as a whole has a lot of respect for Rangers now at this point. And yeah, you don't make it to the semifinals just by pure luck. There's a lot of quality in the side, making through a group stage already with the likes of Olympique Lyon and some other tough opponents. So yeah, this is a side that deserves to be into the semifinals like every other side at the competition. And it's something that Leipzig will cherish now to hopefully be 180 minutes away from a final.
Yeah, of course. And looking at that Dortmund result as well, obviously Rangers this year in Europe have been sort of stop-start. At the very start, we didn't think we were even going to get out the group stage. It was that bad with the results at times, like getting beat off Sparta Prague and Lyon at home, drawn against Brøndby. So it was poor in terms of the group stage, but to get through that and have performed so well after that, obviously it's going to give us confidence, and then the whole of Europe will be on the watch out after that. Because as you say, we've came here, we've played a part. Ibrox is going to be a big fixture in this tie, I think, as well, with the second leg going back to there. How do you feel Leipzig, obviously depending on the result in the first leg, will cope with that atmosphere there?
Yeah, it's something that is particularly difficult for German sides right now because they've obviously been in a Corona lockdown for far longer than their British counterparts. I mean, crowds returned to Germany just in the past month or so. And you looked at the atmosphere that Dortmund went into in the Ibrox, a side that, I mean, historically, they have one of the best atmospheres in Europe. And even there, it felt like they weren't necessarily up to the speed or ready to go into that cauldron of an atmosphere. And for Leipzig in particular, a side that isn't necessarily renowned for having a massive fan base or a massive really fan culture. It's, like I said, an upstart club, one that doesn't have a lot of history like your Borussia Dortmunds or like your Rangers. Just looking earlier today, I mean, there's a 137-year advantage in terms of Rangers history versus Leipzig. So that should definitely tell you something about the fan culture that they've been able to cultivate versus what the East Germans have to offer. So yeah, I think it's definitely something that should be taken into account. I think that Rangers will be happy to have this first leg on home soil because getting an early advantage there and bringing it into East Germany is then something that they can hopefully then bunker in and hope for a good result away from home. And as for Leipzig, you know, they're going to have difficulties in the Ibrox, I think, particularly with Rangers' home record. But I think that these are also professionals, right, who have dealt with, like I said, atmospheres in Manchester United, PSG, big European knockout fixtures before. So it shouldn't necessarily startle them too much.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I mean, these are top players. Obviously, as you say, played in some of the best arenas in European football. The atmosphere at Ibrox, although looking to the Braga game last time, it was said obviously they were a young team. They couldn't really deal with the atmosphere at Monaco when they played there. So that gave me the confidence that we could bring atmosphere and sort of make that our 12th men against Braga, which we did. Depending all on how this first leg goes, I think is how rocking Ibrox will be, because we're not underestimating Red Bull Leipzig by a mile. Obviously, they're a very, very good team, very good results, very top players. Like Nkunku, possibly one of the most informed players on the planet this year. So you can't take away that from Leipzig. The atmosphere is obviously going to help, but the first leg is going to be vital in terms of what Rangers are going to do when they go over to Germany. I'm sort of expecting Rangers to go there and sort of play like we did against Braga, sort of sit back, have maybe like Ryan Kent or Sakala, and then maybe break like that. Personally, that's what I feel like we're going to maybe try and do, because like this Leipzig side is very, very good.
Yeah, and I think that something we saw in that Borussia Dortmund that I unfortunately wasn't able to watch the Braga one, but from that Dortmund one, you saw how lethal Rangers can be in a more reactive approach, right? Ryan Kent played one of the best matches I've seen of him. I remember Ryan Kent from his time at SC Freiburg a couple of years ago, which didn't necessarily show the talent that he has now, but against Dortmund, he had his best display on German soil. So that's fair to say. And I think that Rangers has a lot of talent and potential to hurt a Leipzig side who are very progressive in their own approach, right? They commit a lot of players to attacking phases, like you mentioned, Christopher Nkunku, but also these wide attacking fullbacks. I mean, Angelino is one of the best attacking fullbacks in all of Europe, but defensively, he has a lot of issues when he's put on the back foot. And that's something that a guy like Ryan Kent can definitely exploit.
Yeah, I think so. I think we've got the quality in forward areas to definitely hurt the back line of Leipzig, but the miss of Alfredo Morelos is still going to be as vital as it has been. Obviously, we've had Kemar Roof come in. He's played really well since, but with that attacking threat of Morelos that we had in Dortmund, they sort of bullied Hummels and Zagadou all day long. He's going to be a big miss in terms of that. But what are we sort of going to be expecting for Red Bull Leipzig? If you obviously dived a wee bit into how they commit men forward, but how is their play style?
Yeah, I mean, it's really a tale of two halves this season, because they obviously begun the season under Jesse Marsch, and he had more of your typical Red Bull philosophy, right? Just a nod to that Leeds United scarf back there, right? I thought that he's definitely performed a bit better for Leeds than he's done for Leipzig. So there's a lot more to be looking forward to in the Premier League. But as for Leipzig, I mean, like I said, he brought in a really traditional air-based style, this Red Bull extreme counter pressing, extreme committing players to the attack. And I mean, it had some very exciting moments. They had some pretty important victories. I remember the one in the first half of the season versus Dortmund, which a lot of people in Germany kind of sensed as a turning point in the season. But you never necessarily saw them just get 2 free victories in a row that could get them into a bit of a run of form. And an issue that was abounding throughout the whole process was the fact that he's committing so many players to a press that against better sides than what he was facing in the Austrian flight with Red Bull Salzburg, against sides like PSG, like Man City in the Champions League. These teams have the capabilities to then pass out of pressure, and then you're completely exploited defensively. And I think what Tedesco has done really well is, first of all, go back to this 3-5-2-1. I think that's enough players on the pitch. Correct me if I'm wrong, but 3-5-2-1 that, it adds a bit of defensive security. If you have an attacking fullback like Angelino, he can then push forward, but you still have 3 center backs and 1 defensive midfielder behind him. So you're allowing your attacking players to foray more forwards without knowing that you're leaving major gaps back defensively. And on the other hand, he's also been a little bit more reactionary in his press. And I like to call it just waiting for triggers, right? Like seeing if an opponent is facing their own goal, if they're playing a lateral pass, all these factors where you can then go as a team and be assured that you're either going to win possession or at least force them to put the ball into touch. And something we saw of Jesse Marsch was he was just continuously going, which meant that, of course, you had some spectacular moments where you won the ball high up the pitch. But then you also had a squad that was absolutely exhausted after 70 minutes. And with Leipzig now still in free competitions at the end of the season in the Bundesliga, I mean, it's more important than ever. You mentioned earlier in the show that gap between Leverkusen and Freiburg and how tight that is. The DFB Pokal, of course, we're recording on the semifinals, so hopefully they'll pull into the final, and the Europa League as well. So that's a lot of fixtures that have piled up. And one would imagine that had they continued with Jesse Marsch's gun-ho style throughout the entire season, it just wouldn't have been possible with a squad that, although it's very deep by Bundesliga standards, is still not able to play 50 to 60 games a season at this high of an intensity.
Yeah, of course, we've seen that, especially in Scotland as well. Celtic have adopted that sort of style with Ange Postecoglou playing that sort of gung-ho, like attacking press, like don't kind of stop football. So we've seen that in our own eyes, and we've seen when we've played them, they've not really been able to sort of last over 60, 70 minutes as well with that sort of play style. But what do you expect the Red Bull Leipzig team to be for going into this Rangers team? Do you expect it to be probably obviously the same formation? Do you expect any big surprises coming in, or do you think they'll stay with what they know?
Yeah, I think that there's not going to be any major surprises. I think that, like I said, Leipzig has a very deep squad, which is also a major advantage because you're able to kind of change things around depending on your opponent. I like to kind of compare it to Bayern always, just in Bayern, a key issue this season was the fact that they simply only have about 14, 15 players who are on the level to compete for a European title. So not only does it mean that the same players have to go time and time again, but it also means that you aren't necessarily able to rotate depending on who your opponent is. If they have a weak fullback that maybe can't handle a left footer, you aren't able to necessarily exploit that if you don't have the players available to you. Leipzig does have that, but nevertheless, there's still these key players that will be in every single lineup, whether that's an Nkunku, an Angelino, a Gvardiol, Gulashi, right? These key cornerstones from goalkeeper to striker that you'll see every single time. And I think that there's at least 7 to 8 players where you would be able to bet your house on that they'll be featuring on Thursday.
Yeah,
that's interesting. Say that. Sorry, Jack. I just want to think.
on you go.
What would you say? Like obviously you're talking about strengths and all that. Would you say Leipzig's weakness then this season? Then defensively, is there any you should look for a mistake? Because I'll tell you right now, from a Rangers point of view, if I'm a Leipzig player, I'm waiting for Conor Gulson to make a mistake. He's got them in him. Obviously, me and Jack know about that. But in terms of Leipzig, who's a potential player that maybe could slip up, maybe no in focus? Like, where's their weaknesses there for Leipzig?
Yeah, I think I was thinking about a lot of this going into not just this podcast, but also some written work. And it's somewhat hard to say because, I mean, this is the most informed side in Europe right now. If you looked at their form, no other side in Europe's top 5 leagues has won more or gone longer undefeated. They've conceded fewer goals than anyone but Liverpool and AC Milan in the past 12 matches in the league. So this is definitely a side on quite a good stretch of form. But I think potentially, I'm just looking at your face right now, it doesn't seem like you're necessarily filled with joy right now.
Great to know that, mate. Great to know that.
But I think there's a couple of aspects where you can see Leipzig being undone. And I think one of them is in those wide left channels. You have a player like Christopher Nkunku who likes to drift into there, and Angelino as well. So 2 very, very attacking components. And behind them is 19-year-old Joshua Guardiola, who, I mean, is extremely talented for his age. He's probably one of the best U23 center backs in the entire world, but nevertheless, he's very inexperienced at this top European level. And despite the fact that he's put in stellar performances this year, he's still going to be on his own if Rangers can commit a lot of bodies forward. And we know what Tavernier can do in attacking phases, how lethal he can be with deliveries. So I think that in that sense, Rangers need to be able to kind of exploit this left side of Leipzig's defense/attack and make the most of their opportunities.
Yeah, because I've seen Gvardiol's been one that's been on the sort of minds of a lot of people this season. I've seen him break out in the Euros. Obviously, this year played in left back, same position as where we were watching in the Euros for Borna Barisic, who's our player. Gvardiol started pretty much over him every game, and it's nice to see how he's developed into a top centre half now, not only just a left back. But it's interesting to see. Obviously, he might be a weakness due to his young age. Calvin Bassey as well for us at times in that centre half position, sort of similar. Can play left back, can play centre half. He's vastly unexperienced as well. He's only had 2 really full seasons under his belt for Rangers. He's grown, he's getting there, but he might possibly be a sort of weakness for Leipzig to exploit, especially when you're saying like Olmo and players that can sort of move in and make good movements. In Nkunku, Silva, if he plays. So definitely sort of a few similarities. Obviously on different scale of quality, I feel, with Gvardiol and Bassey, but similar sort of.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, right? I think that Guardiola necessarily as an individual wouldn't be a major weakness, right? He's one of the top center backs in the Bundesliga right now. And as you mentioned, right, the fact that he played left back for Croatia at the Euros also means that he's very adept at stepping out into those wide channels to defend. I mean, there's a lot of top center backs that you can't necessarily say that about. But what I just think the fact that the weakness could come from is that he just won't have the support around him. You have your attacking midfielder in Nkunku that's staying forward. You have Angelino, who doesn't necessarily like to track back. And so if Rangers can commit him to 2v1 situations, even your top center backs in the world, your Virgil van Dijk's, any 2v1 is going to be a difficult scenario to change. And I think that's something that Rangers need to exploit.
Well, listen, I've been saying to Jack all season really about the Europa League. One team I wanted to avoid was Leipzig. I did not want to play them, as you're saying, you're naming off some great talented players there. So I'm all definitely bricking it with the Germany after naming off. I mean, I think they're up there with Liverpool and AC Milan being unbeaten. That's incredible. But I really just feel like when we get them at Ibrox, I think it's a different animal when you come to Ibrox, man. But no, it seemed like a great team. But see, somebody who doesn't really know much about German football, doesn't really look at German football as much as I probably do when it's European nights. Somebody like Ryan Kent, and we've got also Balogun, who's played out there as well. But what was Ryan Kent like in Germany? I know it was you said there wasn't the best time for him, but was he any decent? No, was it just really when he came to Rangers, he's turned it on?
Well, I think if you ask 10 German football fans, how was Ryan Kent in Germany, they'll say Ryan Kent played in Germany. So I think that should kind of give you a clue as to how his stint there was. He played very few minutes. I believe he played about 200 in total. Coincidentally, his only start for SC Freiburg was against Borussia Dortmund. So clearly had a better time of it in his second time around against BVB. But yeah, it wasn't necessarily one to write home about. But regarding Balogun, he was actually very impressive in Germany. He came through Mainz there before, I believe it was Brighton Hove Albion that he went to.
Yeah.
And obviously anytime you're going from a side in the lower half of the Bundesliga to the Premier League and just the wage increase that you see there, you're obviously doing something right. You're performing at a very high level. So I think that's a testament to Balogun's performances in Mainz and that he was able to go to the Premier League, which, I mean, Brighton Hove Albion may not be far better than Mainz, but just from a salary perspective, I imagine he was earning at least 2 times as much as he was in Mainz. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And then looking at maybe some more star players, obviously for Leipzig, we touched on Nkunku. It'd be hard not to talk about him, but is this sort of his like breakout season? Is this the best Nkunku has been in his career so far? Obviously still very young, 24 years old, but it seems like he's now that sort of guy.
Yeah, I mean, I added some statistics earlier on that seemed to scare you two a bit, but I don't think it's going to be getting much better when we get into Nkunku, because in 2022, there isn't a single player in Europe that has contributed to more goals than Christopher Nkunku, not even Kylian Mbappe. So yeah, the kid is definitely special. He's got something up his sleeve. And I think not just in the Bundesliga, but also in Europe, what he did in the Champions League group stage with goals against Man City and PSG, and also what he's done in the Europa League run, it's just truly a testament to what he's capable of. And we were talking about the weaknesses which you can exploit in Leipzig, and one of the keys to this fixture is how do you handle Nkunku, because Leipzig with Nkunku and Leipzig without Nkunku are wildly different prospects. Leipzig with Nkunku are averaging around 2.35 points per game in the Bundesliga, which would see them probably a point off Bayern in first, versus in matches where Nkunku doesn't score or doesn't start, they're averaging 0.92 points per game. So that's the difference between being within touching distance of Bayern at the top of the table or being in the relegation zone in the Bundesliga. That's how important Christopher Nkunku is to this attack.
Oh, well, that's crazy. That's insane. That is really insane.
Yeah.
That's about Nkunku. Seems like that kind of guy for like Erling Haaland as well with Dortmund. Obviously, we didn't play against him. He would have probably made a massive difference, of course, if we had played Dortmund.
He balled it for Calvin Bassey. Calvin,
we could say so.
Where do you think you'll end up in the still stay at Leipzig, or do you think you'll be big move, Real Madrid, Barca?
Yeah, so I think from the Bundesliga perspective, right, you always want to say, my God, would it be nice to have Nkunku stay another year? But there's obviously a lot of factors which could see him interested in a move this summer. I think a big one that a lot of people haven't necessarily been talking about is the fact that the World Cup's in November, and this is a very, very competitive French squad. So if he goes to a side like Real Madrid, goes back to PSG potentially, or in the Premier League, it's very hard for Didier Deschamps to ignore him, right? The performances, like I said, I mean, he's literally the most threatening attacker in world football right now. On the other hand, though, staying at Leipzig isn't necessarily the big platform that a side like Real Madrid has. And should Leipzig fall out of a Champions League spot, I just don't see him staying. There's been some talk that, because of course he has a contract until 2024, so Leipzig aren't necessarily pressured into a sale just yet. And they're talking about potentially having him stay another year, and then with a 60 million release clause, which I mean is relatively low for a player of that talent. But either way, I think that Leipzig will do everything possible to try and keep him here for another season. We see Bayern in transition, BVB not necessarily stable, so there's a real shot at winning the Bundesliga next season for Leipzig if he stays. But on the other hand, selling him this summer, I mean, you're going to get a massive influx of cash and just get even more young talents. If any side in Europe is good at sourcing the transfer market for the next top prospects, it's RB Leipzig.
Took over Ajax with that, really, sort of taking all the best, like kind of young upcoming kind of like FIFA career mode.
It feels like they're playing with cheat codes. That's how it feels like at this point.
Yeah, as you say, Red Bull Leipzig sort of sourcing the best talent. Dominik Szoboszlai is another one. He's sort of been broke out into the scene. Had a pretty decent season, I would say, so far. Obviously none near the levels of Nkunku, but is he going to be another threat? Do you see him starting the game, or do you think he'll start on the bench?
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned the fact that there's probably 7 to 8 guys who will definitely start this match, and Szoboszlai is probably in the other category. He's one that's flirted in and out of the 11 this season, but with very limited minutes, he's done it really well, you have to say. I mean, he's averaging a goal or assist every 115 minutes, so he's a player with a ton of talent, and when he gets the opportunity, he uses it. I would say compared to some of the other players in this roster, he's a little bit more raw. he can do the absolute spectacular. I mean, in a sense, he's even more talented on the ball than Nkunku, which is a bit of a wild statement. But I see Nkunku as the more efficient player, but Szoboszlai as almost like your comparison between like a Neymar and Mbappe, right? Like one is the fancier and more elegant player versus the other one's the more efficient. That's how I would see kind of this Nkunku-Szoboszlai relationship. So I see for an important match of the European semifinal, Szoboszlai initially starting on the bench and then coming on as the game goes on, which I mean, being able to bring Szoboszlai off the bench is a testament to the quality of this Leipzig squad, right? That should tell you everything you need to know. But yeah, he's definitely one to watch out for, whether it be 20 minutes at the end of the game or from the start.
I know I'd rather have coming on the bench. I mean, rather have him coming on than Scott Wright.
Yeah, well, the issue is that 11 people need to start anyways, right? So if not Szoboszlai, then it's someone else that will be starting there instead, who's equally, if not more talented. So yeah.
And even looking at the team that started the Atalanta game last week, like on the bench, you've got Emil Forsberg, who hasn't even used. Like, I remember watching him for Sweden at the Euros as well. Very, very impressive player, and he's not even used again. Just as you say, touching on the testament to how good this Red Bull Leipzig squad is, and how we are definitely not underestimating it. We are happy to get this far at the moment. We feel like we're in touching distance for getting to the final, but we're not underestimating how good Red Bull Leipzig are. I genuinely do feel that this is the top team in the competition. I was speaking to a few of my friends, and they were sort of saying there's not a guaranteed sort of favourite in it this year. Obviously, you would usually have your team that you would look at and you would say, they're going to go for it. But I think left in the competition, I would say Red Bull Leipzig are probably the strongest.
I wouldn't rule out the other German side as well.
Eintracht Frankfurt as well. I mean, we saw them do something special.
As well, man. They're fighting for the life to win it as well.
Yeah, and Eintracht Frankfurt, I mean, we can get on them also a little bit. Obviously, this is a Rangers Leipzig preview, but Eintracht Frankfurt is a side that it's just, they love the European competition like nothing else. I don't know if you can cast your minds back to that run into the semifinals a couple of years ago where they just got knocked out on penalties by Chelsea. But this is a club that just loves going on a European run, and they're at the position in the Bundesliga where they're ninth in the table. They have nothing to play for, so they're really all eggs in this one basket. And yeah, it's a fan base that lives for these moments.
And you saw how good they were at doing it. Like, fantastic result against Barcelona. Some of the scenes for the fans over there as well was insane.
Yeah, 30,000 in the Camp Nou. So yeah, they basically took over the Camp Nou.
So this is like similar to maybe where we are. Obviously, we haven't done as good as Eintracht Frankfurt in European competition. We get into the very latter stages in recent years, but us as Rangers fans, and seemingly the team we have seem to thrive off nights in European competition. It seems to be where we play our best football. You'll see us maybe struggle against Dundee away, and we'll go and beat Borussia Dortmund as we did. It's a weird thing to be a Rangers fan with these sort of things happening. But we're sort of maybe similar to Eintracht Frankfurt the way we play and thrive off these nights. But my final question to you about the whole thing: how do you see the two legs going? Do you see domination in Germany, or do you see the Glasgow Rangers going through?
I think I don't. Regardless of how we spin this, whether it's a Rangers victory or a Leipzig victory, I don't think either side is going to dominate. I think that both sides are too good to be completely torn apart in either the home or away leg. And I think that both of them are going to have a pretty good match plan where they're going to be able to understand what the strengths of the opposition are, how do we negate those, and how can we keep this tie alive for as long as possible. So I think that in that sense, we're going to see fine margins either way. I think that the only reason I would have to say Leipzig is just the fact of your individual difference makers, right? You mentioned Alfredo Morelos and his injury, what a major blow that is, versus at Leipzig, you have all of your key players fit and also in spectacular form. So from that perspective, I just think in these key moments in a European tie, which I mean, ultimately that's what it comes down to in Europe, right? These decision-making in the final third. How do I make this final shot? How do I make this final pass? I think that's something that Leipzig is just ahead of Rangers at the moment. Understandably, right? You have a far larger wage bill and far more financial opportunities. So it's nothing to be ashamed of, but I just think from that perspective, Leipzig will have more. Whether the Ibrox and the atmosphere at home can change that, I think is definitely in the air. I think the fact that Rangers will be playing home the first leg is a massive boost. I think that's something that they can definitely take with them and hope to get a win in this first leg and bring it back to Germany. But without that, I think it would definitely be Leipzig, and still with it, I think it's still slightly in Leipzig's favor.
Yeah, I would personally obviously say the same. As a Rangers fan, of course, you're going to back your team and going to be at the game, and it's going to be a great spectacle to be involved in. But I would say so as well. Red Bull Leipzig looking like the favourites, Lewis. I know you like the back. Is what you thinking for this one?
No, listen, I think they've got an excellent side. I think Cal McGregor, you better have the best game of your life over these two legs. I'm telling you, no funny mistakes here, son. I don't want any of that. No, I just want to see how Connor Goldson and the boys can handle this. I mean, top team. I know we played Dortmund, but in comparison, I just think Leipzig are just blown away. As I said, I never wanted to get drawn against them. Final four, okay, we've got to play them. We'll see what happens, but I just feel like if Ibrox can really just turn it up, mate, I feel like potentially we can do it. I generally think Leipzig will probably win the tournament, but I think it's just nice for us to be in the semi-finals. Just you coming on, it seems like there's a lot of similarities in terms of both in 2 cup competitions, really.
Yeah.
You think about it, both relying on key men in Morelos and Kunku. So it's interesting, but no, man, it's just a tie I never wanted. But Al McGregor, have the best night of your life. Just this whole squad, man. I'm confident in the team to go out and just play for a shirt, man. But overall, I do think Leipzig will go through and win the competition. MD at West Ham, that's what I say.
No, well, fair enough. I would hate to see an English team after we've done so well in it, but that was all we really had to cover. Is there anything you would like to know for us about Rangers, how we're going to set up, and anything you didn't know before?
No, I think, like you guys said, it's a super interesting tie because, as you mentioned, right, there's quite a few similarities between these two sides. I think one interesting aspect is, of course, the mid-season managerial changes that both sides had with Domenico Tedesco on the one hand and Van Bronckhorst on the other. So one thing I'd be interested to know is how Van Bronckhorst has kind of laid his marker down. What has potentially changed from Gerrard's time in charge to now under the Dutchman?
Well, where do you start? At the start of the season, obviously, we went in as invincible champions. We stopped Celtic's dominance. We win the league, and it's sort of dealing with that pressure of being on top again. We started the season off well with a good victory, but then it sort of stagnated, and we kept on going 1-0 down, but we kept on chasing the games back. Early defeats to Malmo and going out the Champions League qualifiers. Dundee United sort of set our season in a weird way to start off with, especially with Celtic in the rebuild as well. It was important that we sort of stayed on top. But then Gerrard obviously took his opportunity to leave, which at the time I hated him for it, but at the moment I can understand why he would move on, especially what's been going on at the club with finances and behind the doors sort of stuff. I can understand why he made that decision. But since Van Bronckhorst's come in, obviously you'll get your honeymoon period when you come in as a manager. He had that. We had a good sort of run up until Christmas, stayed on top, came back for the winter break, sorry. And we were really hit and miss, dropping major points in the league, going behind in the league, and then keeping the European form going, which has sort of been the story of our season. He's been able to get the best out of some players that we maybe thought were not interested anymore. He's implemented his style of play. It's took him time, obviously, but he's getting there. He's getting the best out of these players. The players seem to be playing for him, and he's a more sort of tactical manager than Steven Gerrard. Steven Gerrard kind of waited, seeing if it was going to work because he felt like that was the best game plan going into the game. But Van Bronckhorst has no allegiances to anybody in this squad. He will change it where he sees fit. We've seen us drop into a back five at times with John Lundstrom drop him in there. We've went 3 across the midfield with the 2 up front. So he's a more tactical manager. He's done well. He's had a few bumps in the road, but Van Bronckhorst, I think, has got this team and he's steering it in the right direction. Lewis, what do you think?
No, definitely, I agree with what you're saying. I think Gerrard, I would say Gio's much better in Europe than Gerrard. Definitely looks better suiting a tie, I'll say that. Looks like a hitman. Honestly, seeing you see Gio with the gloves on, the jacket and the scarf, it looks like a hitman taking somebody out. No, but just in Europe, I think, as me and Jack were saying, is started. Never thought that we would be this far in the competition, and Gio's really turned that around. It's just really with the league. It's really about all the stuff going on behind the doors. It's about will he get back in the summer, bringing the players he wants, get rid of the players who shouldn't be at Rangers. Scott Wright. There's a lot of players, as you can tell, probably for me, that shouldn't be there. But definitely I would say in Europe he's improved it massively. One question I've got for you, just one last question. Do you know who Greg Stewart is?
Who? I guess no, right?
Oh, but you need to watch him. I'm telling you right now. Ballon d'Or candidate Greg Stewart, Indian Super League or whatever it's called. He's been turning it up.
He's a hero of our podcast. He's a guy that we backed last season.
Okay.
didn't really get an opportunity. He's went over to India and he's tore it up. So he's a kind of cult hero in our podcast. So
unfortunately, I'm the German football writer, not the Indian Super League writer. But perhaps you need to get that guy on if you want to have a bit of a more in-depth talk about this future Ballon d'Or winner. I'll stay with my future Ballon d'Or winner, Christopher Nkundra. So if you want to put some money on who eventually wins I'll happily do that.
Oh no, listen, you win it all day, but I know he's a Rangers man and he's a cult hero on this podcast. But no, world class talent you've got over there in Germany anyway.
Aye, good stuff.
Perfect.
I see that the clock is running down, but great to have you on, Adam. Really interesting to hear about.
Fantastic to be here.
German football, how we're prepared for Leipzig. I feel like I've got a lot more knowledge on how they're going to be. So I appreciate you for coming on, Lewis, as always. Cheers for joining us as well. Adam's links will be in the description if you want to check them out, read some of his stuff as well. Until next time, we'll see you